You're gonna be able to.
All right, everyone, I'd like to call tonight's meeting, September 9th of the Planning and Zoning Mexico Beach to order. And we'll start out with roll call. Tammy, if you'll do that for us, please.
Mr. Henderson,
Here.
Mr. Elsey,
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Here.
Mr. Crease.
Here.
Mr. Cox,
Here.
Mr. Fasagi.
Here. All right, the next item is post reappointments. So we know that Julie Gardner's resigned, and you're going to take us through that.
Yes, since Ms. Gardner resigned her post on the P&Z board, Mr. Larry Henderson took her place on post 1. Mr. Fasagi took Mr. Henderson's place as alternate 1, so the alternate 2 is vacant. So we will be taking applications for this alternate 2 position, and we will post it on Facebook and our website, and they can come to the office as well to pick up an application.
For any of you that like to come to these meetings, if you'd like to sit at this table instead of those chairs, feel free to talk to Tim. Next, we have the minutes of our August 5th meeting. Has everyone up here had a chance to look over the minutes, and do you have any questions?
I do have one question. I'd like to approve the minutes with one conditional addition to be added to the minutes. At the previous meeting, we had a discussion about reasons why there was not a proposal to have an entrance road off of Highway 98. And the engineer gave 5 reasons why it couldn't be done. And then I asked a follow-up question, and I'd like this question to be added to the minutes. It was part of the meeting, it just didn't make the cut for the meeting minutes. And my question was to the engineer, are any of the 5 reasons you just gave us, do any of those have a waiver process? And the answer was yes. So I would like my question asking if there are waivers for any of those reasons be added to the minutes.
Okay. So are there any other additions to the minutes or any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion from Mr. Fasagi to approve the minutes with that addition.
Is Mr. Fasagi allowed to make a motion as an alternate?
So he is not, he is now
Alternate
alternate 1? No. Then you would have to have a member of the commission.
I move that the minutes be approved per the suggested amendments made by Mr. Fasagi.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Henderson to approve the minutes with the addition that Mr. Fasagi articulated. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Would you like to call for a vote?
Okay, Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Elsey,
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Creed.
Yes.
And Mr. Cox.
Yes. All right, next item is development order for Salt Creek temporary parking lot, and we'll start with Laura Mills Gutcher of the Planning Council.
Good evening. For the record, Laura Mills Gutcher. Tim, do I need to be sworn in?
She should be sworn in.
This is a quasi-judicial hearing.
And what I'd like to do, and you can do it after we swear her in, or you can do it before, I'll leave that up to you, Mr. Attorney, but if you would give us a quick overview for not only the board, but the public of, since this is a quasi-judicial hearing, of what that means. And so what those comments will mean if you come forward, how that might be used.
Right. As a quasi-judicial process, you now sit as a recommending fact finder. In other words, the recommendation that you come up with should be based upon facts as determined by this body, and then that recommendation will go to the city council, and the city council will have a similar requirement to base their decision on facts that are presented in testimony before them. The purpose of that is to essentially have a record that if an affected party, and that term is somewhat nebulous in how it's interpreted, but an affected party would have the ability to either seek an injunction against something that the city was trying to do, or pursue a writ of prohibition or some other writ, which that mean a lot to you guys, but basically it's just another legal proceeding. And so you're trying to keep the record clear as to what testimony you received, what documents you received, and that those would be part of the record that would be appealed depending upon the decision of the city council ultimately. It is different than a legislative decision that you all would be recommending, such as a change in the future land use map of the comprehensive plan, where you're looking to do something that relates to a legislative act versus a quasi-judicial act. And the distinction there at this level is other than the testimony and the process, it becomes significant for a court. The court has a different standard for reviewing a legislative decision versus a quasi-judicial decision. So that's why there are two distinctions, and that's why you want to swear all of the witnesses in. You also have to make a disclosure of any ex parte communications that you've had with the applicant that would relate to the issues that are coming before you. So if any of you have had any ex parte communications with the applicant involved in this particular development order, you would have to disclose those on the record so that everyone knows what has occurred. So again, part of the record, just so everybody knows what's happened. Okay.
You say applicant, I guess a representative?
The applicant
Back
or its
here?
representative, yes, sir. They will be sworn in just like if the president of St. Joe was standing here.
Okay.
And for the record, we do have agent authorization that has a affidavit that's been signed and notarized from the property owner that Chris Short can represent them on their behalf.
And I just want the public to understand, just like you need to understand what we do. We're a body that makes a recommendation to the city council. They can accept our recommendation or they can deny our recommendation, but ultimately whatever we decide goes to the city council. And for tonight's purposes, since it's a quasi-judicial hearing, you'll be sworn in and your testimony taken as if you were in court, because that's how it would be used if it was in an appeal, correct?
Right. Now, it's a little looser process here than in the court. You
Sure.
also don't have the strict rules of evidence. This is more of a testimony and question and answer session to some extent. If members of the audience or the applicant were to have questions for any of the witnesses, Laura or anyone else, then technically they have a right to cross-examine, just as the city would have a right to cross-examine whatever witnesses it wants to do that.
Just an explanation of why sometimes when you come up in the public comment, you're not sworn in, but in this case you are, as a quasi-judicial hearing.
And is there any disclosure that needs to be made of ex parte communications about this particular application? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've motioned in the past, I have records from the city of minutes where me and Chris have had discussions, and I made several motions and a recommendation of the council. And also, I was out at the property, went all around the property, the walkways, the parking lot, and the apartment complex and all that.
Okay, so you've made some of those disclosures previously?
Yes.
Okay. And anything additional since the time of those disclosures?
I visited the property.
Well, that's more of you're doing some fact finding as opposed to, you didn't talk to anybody while you were there?
No.
Okay, all right. Then I think given that, unless there are any questions, then I would suggest you go ahead with the process and let Laura make the initial presentation. Again, questions can be asked of her, either by the audience or by you all. And then any other witnesses, I would assume Mr. Short's going to stand up and talk a little bit, and you can ask him questions, as can the audience.
So, Laura, to be sworn.
Can I make a recommendation that we swear in everybody at the same time so we don't have to do everybody individually?
That'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So
You're going to
anyone who
speak
wants to
tonight.
testify or speak about this issue, if you can raise your right hand and Tammy will swear you in.
Does that include anyone who just wants to ask a question, but I don't know if I do or not?
Anybody who wants to speak needs
All right.
to raise your hand and swear in. All right.
Okay.
Tammy?
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
But technically, you guys don't have to. But that's okay. We all did recover it.
All right.
You opened this can of worms.
All right, good evening. Again, for the record, my name is Alara Mills Gutcher, and I have been sworn in. I am here to present to you the Salt Creek temporary parking and pedestrian path. This is a second review, as you first heard this last month at the local planning agency hearing in August. There were some motions the conditions haven't really changed since then, so unless we need to go back through the development order application, I just wanted to go over the part of the motion that you made as a request to the applicant. Those included the look at alternatives to the location of the ingress and egress of the parking lot from Highway 98 rather than Canal Parkway. That you asked the applicant to address all of the engineering comments. That you asked the applicant to address the access easement for the public to have legal access of the parking lot, and to offer a definition of temporary for the purpose of determining the lifespan of the temporary parking lot. And so of that, we have received information that the easement for the public to have legal access to the parking lot is in the works. We don't have that document before us today unless Tim has received it since I last learned of the status of this. So that is something that we are still looking for. I'm pretty sure Chris is here prepared tonight to talk about the alternatives to the location of the ingress and egress from Highway 98. They have addressed all of the engineering comments. There are some conditions in there that engineering has requested, and you can look through that if you've looked through that already. And I think Chris is going to verbally talk about the definition of temporary. That's not something I received in writing before. They had the opportunity to compile the staff report. So still having reviewed the status of the application, the recommendation is for approval with the condition that the applicant address all the outstanding issues prior to the scheduling of the city council hearing, which I understand is now scheduled for tomorrow, so we'll have to work out that timing, but that is my recommendation.
So staff recommends, is there anyone in the public that has any questions of Chris? Okay, you'll need to come forward and state your name and your address.
My name is Bonnie Paulson. I live at 118 Canal Parkway, Mexico Beach, and I am directly next to the lift station, so this impacts me. My issues are basically emotional because I've owned that property since 2008. I don't believe that it would be a temporary parking lot. I personally believe that they are going to park their construction equipment there. It is a residential area, and to give access to that down Canal Parkway would be disastrous because it's a very narrow street. I don't see how emergency vehicles would be able to get down there with the traffic. There's no way you can widen Canal Parkway. I don't know how the pedestrians are gonna walk down the middle of the street, if they even use that parking lot, which I doubt. Because we, as human beings, are lazy people, and I don't believe that people are gonna park in that parking lot. And if you assume there are 4 people per car, we're talking about possibly 248 people trucking down the middle of the street to get to the beach. Gravel, temporary, I don't believe that they're going to remove that. I think it's gonna be a permanent thing. I think when they develop the motel back there in that whole area, people will be using that outlet to leave the area instead of whatever else they build. And so that's gonna plug up the street. Now you introduced noise factors, pollution, exhaustion, trash, overnight parking, outsiders coming in. And they said that if they use 98 to get into that parking lot, they would have to build a bridge for people to get down there, and they don't want to use that money to do that.
And I'm just gonna let you know, next I'm gonna bring up Chris, but
Okay.
I'd intended that if anyone had any specific questions about
Okay.
Laura, but the applicant is actually gonna come up and
Okay.
define
so that's, yeah.
temporary and many, many other things, so.
You're basically, what the city is doing is you're introducing a commercial traffic to a residential area. And that's not fair to us. I mean, I don't want it. If they want to plug into 98, go for it, but not down my street. I can't envision getting out of my driveway. Thank you for your time and consideration,
Do
appreciate
you have
it.
any questions for Laura?
Oh, well, I guess he's gonna tell me about the temporary date, the time. The other thing I want to know is, what are you gonna do about the existing bald eagle nest in that area? I understand from the Florida wildlife people that nothing can impact that nest within 660 feet of a reoccurring nest every year, and they've been there since 2008.
It's my understanding there's not a tree on the site where they're going to put the
No, but
parking lot.
it's a,
I understand, do you know
a mile.
where is the nest?
my neighbor has it, I can point it out on
Right
that.
across Salt Creek.
Yeah,
Right
it's
across
all,
there. They live where the Burbank house is.
yeah.
right
and
on there.
The trees back there. And they're still an endangered species, and that will be, a commercial would have an impact.
So just to be clear, this is not a commercial use, it's a parking lot. There is no trip generation occurring here. There is no attraction here. It would be at the Coast Association a recreational use, since people are using that to park to go down to the beach.
So you won't have construction vehicles and stuff that park there?
That's not my understanding.
Now, from my experience living next door to that area, no one has ever used the city
That was my question.
parking lot there.
I was gonna ask you that.
Nobody has ever used it. I mean, you can ask Sandy. So I don't understand what the need is to build that when there's no use.
So this was something that the city council required of the developer to construct this parking lot, this temporary parking lot. And so that was based on some conversations various residents within Mexico Beach had brought forward at a council hearing.
What year? Was it, it wasn't this council, it was a past council?
Correct.
Okay. So they.
Within the last, I don't know if it was this past January or the time, or sometime before that, but it was within the last 12 to 18 months. And I don't know, Chris might have.
If I
that
can comment on
information.
that. Actually, it was a recommendation, an approval we made right here, 5-0 from the planning board, that went to the council with the recommendation for the parking lot. The reason being, it's not being used that much right now, the apartments aren't full, the townhomes aren't for sale yet, and you're building all the houses. When that comes, we have to do something. There's gotta be parking somewhere. The only other place for people to park would be going down to the dedicated beach down here, where the whole neighborhoods are. That's why we required a parking lot to be built before they could sell the homes.
But wouldn't it make more sense to put that access further down to Living Sweet Sands or whatever that's called? Because that part of the beach is not used. My part of the beach is used by fishermen constantly. They pack my beach. With swimmers out there, you're gonna have a conflict. And I don't foresee it. The people, the human nature is to drive to the beach, park right there, get all of your crap out and your kids, and walk down to the beach. This way, they're going to have to walk all the way down in the middle of the road because there's no driveway. I mean, there's no sidewalk.
Well, I'm waiting to see what Chris has to propose here,
Yeah.
because I think there might be some differences coming. The
Okay.
original recommendation was a little bit different than what's been presented now.
Okay,
So I want to see what the changes are.
okay.
Well, let's go ahead and bring up Chris then.
Okay.
So I have one more question for Ms. Paulson, please.
Yeah,
If the access to this parking lot would come off of Highway 98, would you object to the parking?
no,
Thank you.
I would not.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Thank
Chris?
you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Short, Dewberry. I have kind of just a historical timeline of things. I don't know if it would help. I'm going to talk through it. It might help to look at it if I would be allowed to pass it out to you
Yes.
guys. It's just a one sheet thing. I think I have enough for me to have copies of it. Okay. So, just because this has been a process. We got enough.
Okay, good.
So I'll go with that. Two, one person. All right, so as Rock mentioned, the reason that this whole project came about, when we originally got a preliminary plat approval pursuant to the approved PUD for Salt Creek Phase 2 back January 24th, 2023. Then later on that year, we came before you guys for development order approval. That was November of 2023. At that point during the meetings, concerns were expressed about beach access parking facilities like Mr. Crease alluded to, with the additional demand, the existing capacity of beach access parking through the city. And so it was requested and a condition was added to the development order approval that my client provide a plan to the city for both pedestrian access from the north side of 98 and to provide a public parking area on the south side of 98 until the permanent beach park access parking that's identified further to the south of the PUD come online. We talked about timeline of that concept plan, and we basically said we'll have something to the city to look at as a concept by the end of 2023. December 12th, 2023, we had provided another concept prior. We got some comments from city staff, and so 12/12/2023, we provided a revised concept to the city administrator that incorporated the comments from the original plan that we sent over. Then, coming up on the end of the year with meetings happening and not happening, we basically decided and requested of the city administrator, look, we provided this to city staff, but we really want to make sure that everything is memorialized, formalized to the city. So we requested that we be added to the city council agenda in January, just to present the plan formally, get any concerns, questions that we needed to address before we got kicked off with surveying and permitting, because we didn't want to go too far down a road and then have to back up. So that meeting happened January 23rd, 2024. It showed pretty much the current configuration, location of the parking lot. Again, that was to city council, not to planning, but we discussed it, questions were asked, we answered the questions about, okay, so this is the access that you plan on using off of Canal Parkway. Not having anything come up from that meeting, that's when we kicked off the whole process, and then the rest is just kind of regulatory, when we submitted DO applications. We did submit an environmental resource permit application to the state, and they have commenting agencies. We did not receive any kind of inquiry from the commenting agencies, which would include, Florida Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but that's something that I will look at for sure. Yeah, we just, did not have any comments from the agency saying anything about bald eagle nest. And then, back to all the way down to last month, coming to the planning and zoning meeting, which I unfortunately had a prior engagement, so I could not attend. But in that agenda packet, that's when we basically received the additional engineering comments, and we've since then addressed those engineering comments. We've made a couple changes based on those comments, and here we are.
Okay.
So what is the here we are? So we currently still have the access as shown in the original. What I prepared was kind of an exhibit illustrating what Richard was talking about previously, the different elements that kind of selected where our access was going to be. We have the floodplain that swings out here. We've got wetlands further to the west, and really to avoid impacting the floodplain, this would be the location on 98. That is 330 feet from Canal Parkway. Now, on this north side, we ended up getting a secondary driveway access for the boat ramp, again at the request of the council. That was denied 2 or 3 times, and then finally DOT approved it. But the regulation, according to DOT, and this is in the Access Control Handbook, for the roadway access class of 98, and then the classification of the roadway itself being C2T, rural town, and the speed limit, the minimum distance between connections to an FDOT road is 440 feet. So it doesn't meet that spacing. I think that there might have been some requests from the city on the previous connection there at the boat ramp road. It did not meet the 440 foot spacing, but it was essentially just an auxiliary connection for that same roadway. It wasn't a brand new facility, so to speak. So that's another reason that, to avoid impacting the floodplain, with this being temporary parking in nature, we wanted to avoid impacting floodplain, impacting wetlands. So that's why the location was selected. In the eventual PUD plan, there is a major roadway connection planned on 98. But at that point, there's going to have to be, turn lane improvements and things along those lines, because that will be a traffic generator. This is not a traffic generator. The traffic generator is at the end of Canal Parkway, at the park with the established approved beach access. Another thing against moving it further to the west is, those are not established permitted beach accesses. So we have one here through the dunes, but you push further west, you have the dune system, the 2 dune systems that run parallel to the shore. Those would have to have, extensive permitting to get a true established beach access permitted. There is one here at the end of Canal Parkway, and so that's another kind of reason why it was selected as far as the location of the parking lot. Going into some of the concerns, I was forwarded a draft license agreement that St. Joe's folks pulled together. Tim, I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but we have the draft agreement put together for the back and forth with the city, seeing what's what needs to be added or taken away. In that agreement, it basically says, unless terminated by the licensor, or St. Joe, the license shall run for a period of 5 years, unless sooner terminated or extended. So the definition of temporary is kind of incorporated in here. And the other comment that the engineers had about landscaping, I think their recommendation in their staff report is based on the agreement the St. Joe says, if in 5 years this hasn't been removed and a more permanent solution established elsewhere, that they'll go in and do all of the landscaping and everything. So 5 years as far as the definition of temporary. And that, again, appears in the draft license agreement. Something else in the draft license agreement, it states use of the property for long-term, overnight trailer or oversized vehicles will not be allowed. So as far as construction equipment being parked there, that's specifically addressed in this draft agreement. So that was just another thing that, you know, with the previous concerns. Now to Laura's specific items that she mentioned in her staff memo, you know, the alternative locations for ingress, egress. Again, you know, when we started designing this, before we went out and did survey, we looked at what would make sense, what would be the best. You know, having something on 98 here, it's not a traffic generator, but anybody turning in there to go park there for the use of the beach, you know, traffic's gonna have to slow down and all of that. For, you know, the existing park at the end of Canal Parkway, you know, folks are already, if they're going to that location, they're already turning down Canal Parkway. They may be getting to the end and seeing there's no parking and turn around and coming back, as opposed to just going straight there, you know, with this location. The engineering comments have been addressed. The license agreement that will accompany the easement has been provided in draft form to the city. And then the temporary nature, again, temporary, it's 5 years. You know, the eventual plan as the PUD builds out is to incorporate these beach access parking still to be public access in that point as well into a more permanent parking lot. But for right now, 5 years is what the agreement was. So, you know, we're proposing this specifically because the city council requested that this be a condition of the permit. My client's happy to do it, but, you know, it's not something that they want to go and spend their money freely to do. But it was requested and they decided, you know, hey, you know what, let's do it.
Is that a change with 98 connecting? Or
No,
it
this is
a
just
proposal?
showing like what it would look like
Okay.
if we located it there. Because we have the concerns about the wetlands and the floodplain, so that limits how far to the west we could put that. So that's about the furthest west that we could put that connection.
Mhm.
And this is just showing, you know, the proximity that would be 330 feet from Canal Parkway, and that doesn't meet the DOT requirements.
So is your client looking at that?
Well, that's what we have looked at that in this whole process, but that's why that is not the proposed connection.
Okay.
When the city council approved phase 2 under the condition of building a parking lot on the south side of the road, did they mention at all anything about road access?
Not to my knowledge.
And this has been the location, you know, looking back at the timeline, back January of this year, when we proposed and presented this project in its concept form. It was always at this location, you know.
Actually, Chris, you go back through your minutes, I got them right here.
Okay,
Planning and Zoning Board, January 9th, 23.
okay,
We made the motion, recommend approval, contingent upon the developer in the near future add commercial space and beach access for the development side. The beach access, when I talked to you on the map there, we looked at it, right across from Salt Creek is a road that goes over there with the gates. And that's where we looked at originally for putting the parking lot, which is back in your wetlands a little bit.
yeah,
But
right,
the reason we looked at that, because that's where it is there, and the house is back further, and a walkway going back. You look at your preliminary plans, they're gonna fill all that in anyway. That's gonna be filled in, I mean, if St. Joe Company can build an airport and move 98 and Windmark, they're gonna fill that in. Doesn't matter if it's wetlands or not. That's gonna happen. They can do anything. That's gonna happen. Right now, they're just doing this, but to save money. Now, I don't have a problem with the parking lot where it is, but the road should be. I mean, that's gonna be a discussion. I got everything right in here, and I don't know where this changed because I have all the agendas, all the minutes. And when Salt Creek Phase 2, the modification was approved, it says black and white. Rich Wolf, who was on the council at the time, made the motion and to put that lot in, and the lot was supposed to be built before Salt Creek Phase 2 could go vertical. When did that change? It says it right in there in the minutes. It was approved by the city council that you couldn't go vertical until that lot was put in. I don't understand what happened. Somewhere some finagle went around the back room because that's not anywhere in anything I've read.
Well, we're still basically in line with that. I mean, we haven't come to you for the final plat.
They're built. The townhomes are built.
That was Salt Creek Phase 1.
Phase 1.
Well, Phase 2 is under construction right now.
Correct, the site work. That's correct.
Do we need to go ahead?
No, this is
public.
good.
So we
No,
can see-
this is real good. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
can we just see the diagram? We can't see it.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And I'd love that conversation to continue.
Yeah, me too.
I have a question about the waiver that was clearly granted for the north side of the road. Can you, or maybe Alara, can you explain to me, explain to us, I guess just in a little bit more step-by-step detail, clearly those two Mexico Beach crossings / boat ramp entrances on the north side of the highway are less than 440 feet, which is the DOT regulation. So those got approved through a waiver. Can you explain a little bit more about how that?
Honestly, we got denied outright twice, and then DOT just said, okay, we'll resubmit and we'll approve it. My understanding of why that was allowed is because it was an alternate connection for the boat ramp road. So it wasn't a new facility as defined by DOT being any kind of development. A parking lot is a facility, a building, whatever. It was just an alternate to the existing connection to the facility.
Okay. Next question, and
Okay, go ahead.
I'll let somebody else ask. If there is an entrance to this parking lot off the south side of Highway 98, and it is 440 feet and 1 inch away from Canal Parkway, can you show us on the map where that would be?
Is it 440 feet or 400 feet?
It's 440.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, I
It's based on speed limit.
Okay.
yeah, and it's based on speed limit
Right.
and stuff like that too.
So Chris, my question is real simple.
Mhm.
The future development of that wetland is it's gonna be filled in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so moving the road further west, or the access point we'll call it, to meet the DOT guideline, how would that impact your client's development of that area? Is that why because filling the dirt in
Sure.
to put a road in today is gonna be cheaper than it's gonna be 5 years from now.
And then you mentioned an extra turn lane might have to be built.
That's fine. Yes.
So can I make just as a timeline issue here? So they're trying to get the Phase 2 approved, but the council said we're not gonna approve that until you build this parking lot. And so they're kind of in a catch-22 where they can't get their development order for Phase 2 until they build the parking lot. And in order to fill wetlands, DEP permitting takes a long time. It's gonna hold them up certainly past the end of the year, probably well into next year. And I don't know if there's any 404 permitting going on with that too, but 404 permits can now take up to 2 years. So it's a timing issue. And they're just they're hanging on trying to get their development order permit for Phase 2, but because of the condition of the parking lot, they haven't been able to
Understood.
retrieve it.
However, just for conversation purposes, this timing issue is one of their creation. You know, they're setting up their timeline, and they,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, if we know they're gonna fill all that in, they knew that when they developed this. So the idea that now all of a sudden we're holding them hostage to a timeline they've created is worth discussing.
Yeah, respectfully, I don't see this as a catch-22. I see this as an additional delay. Clearly, it would be months to years, but I remain unconvinced that the property owner should not have seen this coming.
Chris, did the city, you showed the city this plan with that access to that lot, and there was no objection?
Correct.
Thank you.
And yeah, that was January 17th of this year, I believe. Or the 24th. We requested that,
23rd.
yeah, or 23rd. We requested that it be put on the agenda to have that discussion, just so everybody was, you know, above board and aware of what was going on. And so it was the 23rd.
Yes, so the parking lot conceptual design was brought to the city council on January 23rd for discussion. No vote, they heard it, they saw it, and no vote was taken on the conceptual proposal. They didn't take a vote.
Did that conceptual proposal include an access road to the canal? Did that approval or that design or that plan or that initial draft show where the access to the car canal would be, whether it's 98 or Canal Parkway?
Yes, sir. It showed it coming off of Canal Parkway.
Okay. Chris, does that conclude your?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, just happy to answer any questions that you folks or the public may have. But I think that covers all of the items that I specifically was going to bring to your attention. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to open the public discussion part of this, and if you have a comment, you need to come up to the podium, state your name and your address.
Thank you. Karen Wolf, 130 Canal Parkway.
Okay.
I did have a question. Did I hear that the design, though it showed, as I understand in January, it showed that it would adjoin Canal Parkway? There wasn't a vote, though, actually made.
No, there was no vote. It was just discussed, brought to the council for discussion, questions, concerns, but it was not a voted on agenda item.
Okay, which might help whereby the 16 lots on Canal Parkway were not informed or not aware that this was taking place. There was no notices posted or anything like that. So you've got a street on Canal Parkway, and I'm trying to further emphasize concerns that Bonnie raised. You have Canal Parkway that is a fisherman's street, a fishing street, 16 lots. It was designed for 16 lots. It was not designed to accommodate 62 parking places in addition. So that's point one. And we'll get to the LDR here in just a minute that further supports the conflicts that this would cause and where it shouldn't be done. Let's see, losing my train. You had another comment, and you had mentioned as far as the permanency. The proper action is to put forth the funding for the permanent solution, not a temporary fix. I would have a concern if an easement is granted. That easement is permanent, is it not? The one that would go to Canal Parkway?
Not necessarily.
The license agreement includes specific timelines.
What about, let me ask, I guess that's a question for council. If an easement is granted, is that permanent or is that
Does
temporary?
not have to be. I had originally drafted an easement. I received sometime today, just briefly looked at it before the meeting tonight, the license agreement. So my initial draft was an easement, not a license. There is a legal distinction on termination and those kinds of things. My understanding was that the process included an ultimate goal of the parking lot being in a permanent location, which was a part of an approved PUD, a planned unit development, and that was going to occur at some point in time when St. Joe did an adequate amount of development, and that they would build that permanent parking lot. My original draft of the easement talks about a relocation of the temporary to the permanent. doesn't have a term limit of 5 years. It says, when you get to this point, you will develop the permanent parking lot. But this temporary concept came in apparently, and Laura and I guess neither one of us were there, and Mel, when the council considered it conceptually, but it's been termed a temporary parking lot. And so from my perspective, from a legal standpoint, whatever you get, whatever you all end up with and the council ends up with, we're gonna need some kind of document. I'm not sure a license is what I'm suggesting, but some kind of document to evidence who's gonna do what and when they're gonna do it and what rights the public has to that lot. And so, that's, in addition to the engineering comments, I would hope that you would also add that legal comment to your, whatever you all do.
Mrs. Wolf, are you opposed to the existence of this parking lot if the entrance was off Highway 98?
That would be my secondary thought. My primary is they move forward with a permanent solution and not affect Canal Parkway, period. What they're doing, so in part, yes. I don't want it coming on Canal Parkway. And furthermore, it needs to be where its plans are on a permanent basis. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm sure council on the LDR, you'll see where there's other concerns with regard to traffic flow. I don't know that a traffic study's been done. There's gonna be problems with people having to turn around that causes issues for lot owners and homeowners. There's too much traffic there with this planned parking lot, where now they're going to be pulling people's driveways that have pavers, whatever else, to try to hook a U-turn because there's no parking there. I don't know how often you're down on Canal Parkway. In the summertime, it's standing room only. And now we're going to just have an influx of 62 more cars trying to maneuver in Canal Parkway. And how are they maneuvering? On every lot owner's parking lot, driveway, not parking lot, driveway. That's how they're going to maneuver around. That's going to harm every owner's parking facility because we've got to have the impervious driveways.
Was the existing parking lot full during the summer?
It's not been in use right now. Are you talking, oh, this summer you're talking about?
Yes. Was it in use this summer?
Yeah, there were a couple of days.
The previous person said no, that's why I asked.
Well, and I would want to ask Bonnie, there were some days when I would travel down, because we haven't built yet, but there's days I would come down, and it was a bit tough to find a spot for me.
Oh, you're talking about the end?
I'm talking about Canal Parkway.
At the beach?
Yeah, so if she's gonna comment, she's gonna need to come up.
I'm sorry, okay. Just hold that thought if you would answer. I would say, I had some days when I would come down and it was close to full. Not completely, but I had to find a spot.
I told you I visited the property. I did that on Labor Day last Monday, and there were 0 cars in it.
Well, but our weather wasn't very good.
Well, it was beautiful that day. It was Monday.
Okay.
We could look up the weather, but I remember.
Okay.
And it was just a nice day, and my wife and I took our dog down to the beach. We parked down near the end. It was semi-crowded at 10 in the morning, but it was not so crowded that anyone was parked up in the gravel parking lot that's there now on that day.
That will change as each home construction is completed, and you've also got the homes that sleep 16 people that are, like the one at 138 Canal Parkway. There'll be 8 or 9 cars there. So I'm just saying, I don't know to what extent a traffic study has been done to be consistent with the LDR and the influx of traffic that would be expected. That should be looked at. If that temporary is going to be there, it does not need to come onto Canal Parkway. They can do a loop around the temporary, have it come in off 98 and exit out of 98. I did hear the comment that you don't want people having to slow down on 98 so they can turn in. Well, hell, they slow down off 98 to turn in on Canal Parkway. Slowing down on Canal or slowing down a few hundred feet back west, mox nil. It does not matter. So, and the points I just wanted to make that should be considered. The beach access permitting, I would think that would be in the works now, to have beach access permitting further to the west on 98. That should not be something that's delayed. They should be looking at that now. That would further accommodate if you were to do the access from the north side townhomes and all that development coming across into the parking coming off 98. That would help that if they would start pursuing their beach access there. And I'm thinking, I don't know if Town Village Way is that street there that I'm talking about, where there's a gate there. I don't know if that's been considered, to have it come across there. Is that where the wetlands are?
That was the original.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, that should still be, and that's the sidebar comment here I would like to make. I don't know why that hasn't been considered, especially if they're filling the wetlands. That would seem the logical point to me.
That was the original, right there, with the gate. That was the
Yeah,
original where the
yeah.
parking lot was gonna be with the walkway back to the beach.
And that's the
That
permanent
was
one.
originally proposed back in January of '23,
And it wasn't agreed to
by
why?
us right here,
Okay, and why wasn't it pursued, do we know?
the council.
Okay, but there was no vote.
We
Or was there a
voted
vote?
here to do that and recommended to the council to do that.
Okay, and council did not,
That's,
or we don't know that it ever went to a vote?
it went, and the last vote that was made was by Rich Wolf, when he was on the council, to hold up the phase 2 until they put in the parking lot.
Okay,
And then I guess they changed it back in January this year, saying it's gonna be where it's proposed now, from where we originally proposed it to be. But you got a two-pronged thing here you're looking at. You also have the sidewalk that's coming from the apartments. I know there's 200 and something, how many apartments, 200 and something back there?
216.
Where they're gonna come right down Canal Parkway. That's coming right down Canal Parkway. Chris, how much the turnoff from 98 to that parking lot is short by how much? It can't be made?
110 feet.
Okay. The question I have, I mean, you guys built an airport, moved 98 in Windmark. Is there any, I mean, I would think that they could get a waiver for a temporary lot that would probably have a gravel road to it. I mean, like she mentioned, everything on 98 has a side street. Speed limit from Mexico Beach is 35 from one end to the other. And every side street just turns. I mean, there's no turn lanes or nothing else. And for up there, there's a way that your company could go back and fix all this and make it where everybody would be happy. And that would be to put the parking lot where you decided right now would have access from 98. Take that sidewalk that you planned on coming down, going to the bridge and underneath, which is another hassle. Everybody coming that way, there's nowhere to walk. They're walking in the street or on the docks. And that's a safety hazard. And walking on docks, people have boats there is insane. The smartest thing to do would be that road, make that road right off of your apartments, go to that parking lot, put a sidewalk in there and put a crosswalk. There's crosswalks all on 98. Put a crosswalk there. People from the apartment could go right down to where the lots are, where your proposed parking lot is, and then put another sidewalk from there down to the pavilion. And that way people aren't walking in the street. I mean, there's a city right-of-way there where some of them houses are that a sidewalk could go in. That's city right-of-way property. Or you could put it back further on your property. But that solution, I'm sure, would make everybody happy here if your company went back and looked at that. Because that walkway is a joke. I timed it today. It's almost a half a mile to get to the first apartment from the pavilion, and if you go to the back of the apartment place, it's like 8, 9/10 of a mile. Nobody's gonna do that and carry stuff to the beach. That's insane.
Thank you. There were a couple of things on the LDR I just wanted to point
And
out.
if you
and
can
I'm-
wrap it up pretty quickly so we can get some other members of the public.
So I've got 2 points. 3.00.03, Principles of Development Design. All development shall be designed to avoid unnecessary impervious surface cover, to provide adequate access to lots and sites, and to avoid adverse effects of shadow, glare, noise, odor, traffic, drainage, and utilities on surrounding properties. That won't happen here. So that, I see no way that happens. We'll have traffic, we're gonna have noise, and that's on 3.00.03. Then if you look further, you've got 3. 3.05.01, general provisions. This is on your transportation systems. And within this section, it establishes the minimum requirements applicable to the development of the transportation system, including public and private streets, bikeways, and pedestrian walkways. The standards in this section are intended to minimize the traffic impacts of development, to assure that all developments adequately and safely provide for the storage and movement of vehicles, consistent with good engineering and development design practices. We wouldn't be here if that was met. Canal Parkway was 16 lots. Doesn't happen. And I think everything else was answered.
So
Thank you.
Ms. Wolf just read from a 3-page memo that was presented to those of us on the Planning and Zoning Board as well as the city clerk. I'd like to ask one of my fellow board members to please make a motion that 3-page memo be added to the record.
And I was the author of that memo. I had a typo or a little error in there. My apologies.
Tammy, was that memo added, or Mel, was that added at the last meeting?
We got it after the last meeting.
You didn't have it at the last
No.
meeting? I'll make a motion that we added amendment.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second.
Thank you very much. Did y'all have any questions for me?
No other questions.
Thank
What
you.
was that second citation you made?
Excuse me, we have a motion on the table.
We do, just letting her finish.
3.05.00, transportation systems. Anything
Okay.
else?
That's it.
Thank
And
you.
we have a motion from Steve and a second from Larry, so if you'll call for a vote.
Okay. Mr. Henderson?
Yes?
Mr. Elzey?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Okay, anybody else from the public that would like to come up and come forward, Lisa?
Lisa Logan. The overarching question for y'all and for the council is, what is best for the town? And I'm not surprised that this has come up. I certainly expected it once St. Joe started their developments. The St. Joe Company has its plan. We have our plans, or we have our visions. They don't mesh, and St. Joe does not want to build something like a temporary lot that comes in and out of 98. It's not on their plan. This is the PUD plan here. It's not part of their plan. They do not want, as Mr. Short did say, the permitting is a lengthy and very costly process. This client does not want to do that. It boils down to, does the developer get to do what it wants? And what is best for the town? So your recommendation to the council is most likely going to be overruled, but you need to decide what is going to work for us, because as I pointed out a long time ago, and I'm using this map over here because it shows our coastline right over here. If there is no way to move the number of people in the St. Joe development, and look at the brown spot, the brown piece there that shows how large their development is. If they have all of these people on the north side, how do they get them across to the south side, to the beach that's on the west of the canal? Because if they don't provide a way to get them across the highway and down through their own property, then all of those people are going to have to access the beach down the rest of our coastline. I'm not saying they don't have a right to go on that beach. Of course they do. It's public beach. I'm talking about the number of people and the number of cars to get from the St. Joe development to a beach that they can access. So the question that I think should be asked, why is the developer not being amenable to moving its clients, its residents, across its own property to get to that beach in a much more timely and more efficient manner?
Amen.
That's what you
Amen.
need to look at, because what is best for the town?
As a permanent solution.
Thank you, Lisa. If you'll approach, please.
I have a question for Chris.
So come up.
I'm
state-
coming.
Then you'll have a question for Chris.
John Harrell, last house in Bay County, so I'm not affected by any of this.
What's your address, John, please?
Last house in Bay County, 43 First Street.
Thank you.
Chris, this picture here, you're proposing, you're saying you can't put this road in?
Correct.
Okay. Is this picture match this picture here? Is that the same thing?
It might be pretty close. That was a concept, a PUD concept.
So this is no
plan.
good now, is what you're saying?
It's pre-permitted. That's a concept.
Okay, so you're talking about putting it in to get a permit, but yet you're telling us this isn't within the boundaries or legal.
I think it's okay to explain what a concept is and what a revision and a next step is.
Right, so that is kind of a high level concept. The PUD was more about, it's more about land use and such, as far as what's locked in. When you actually get into the permitting process and start going phase by phase and looking at all the requirements, the ponds that are shown on there may look vastly different. They may be smaller, they may be larger. Once you start going through the actual permitting process for a design of a project that's going to happen, that's when all of those requirements, so that road may shift slightly. That was just kind of a master concept plan. It wasn't, fully, done for permitting purposes. So that's kind of what I meant by it. It may shift slightly.
But it will eventually still be there.
Maybe not in that exact physical location, but that roadway connection will still, if it's allowed by the permitting, it will still be there. It may just be further away.
So you came with the concept to the citizens
Mhm.
and the council without knowing that you can actually do it. Is that the way I understand it? Because that's what I'm hearing.
It's a
How it's done.
Yeah,
That's how it's done.
it's a master
For a
plan,
concept.
so those tend to have
Okay.
little shifts here and there.
So what I'm saying, it's not fair to these people and the council to vote on something if you can't come with, well, yeah, we can put it somewhere there, or we might not even be able to put it there at all, but give us the approval. Am I understanding that?
I'm not sure I'm understanding you, but when we look, as a planner, when we put together a plan, a PUD, a plan unit development, it's like a bubble map. And so I worked on the West Bay sector plan, which was the impetus for the relocation of the airport. They had all kinds of roads and uses in there that probably do not match what's going on today on the ground, because the concept is what you use to get the approval of the PUD. It's not a site-specific approval. It's not saying this is where this road's gonna be, this is where this stormwater's gonna be, this is where this exact house is gonna be. It's a concept. It has room to change and grow as permitting allows. So if the FDOT says you can't put that road there, they're not gonna put that road there. And they don't know that until they get into permitting stage.
Okay, so
Yeah.
well, you're asking them to vote and make a decision on something that we can't. It's like making a vote on something we can't prove. What I'm saying is you're talking about you can't put this one in,
Right,
but yet you show it here in the concept to get the PUD started.
sure.
So
But
once
that,
the PUD is started, and then you get the permit, and say, oh, well, by the way, we can't do that. I'm sorry, you people on Canal Parkway. You're just gonna have to live with it. That to me doesn't seem quite fair.
Thank you for your input, but we
Wait a minute,
do need
wait.
to get back to the.
I thought we were there. I'm sorry.
Well, not the concept, we're not talking about the concept tonight, we're talking about this.
well, and I think to maybe address where you're, like, the direction you're headed with that roadway connection will be on 98 to provide access to the PUD areas. It may not be physically exactly where it's shown on the map, it may be further to the west, but the future phase, once we get to that future phase's design, that access into the PUD will not come on Canal Parkway. This is just there because this is a temporary parking that was requested by the council as part of the
So
development.
there's no way we can avoid going down Canal Park.
Let's wrap up with public comment, and then we're gonna move it to the
John, can you
council.
put that back?
I go,
All
I
right,
just want to remind the board that we need to find, if there's a citation in the code that would prevent you from recommending approval tonight, we need to use that and find that. But I submit there isn't anything that would prevent you from approving it tonight.
understood. Anyone else from the public want to come up and speak? All right, go ahead.
I wanted to wonder, according to that,
You still need to come up and state your name and your address.
okay, Bonnie Paulson, 118 Canal Parkway. This is my house. I'm gonna have a freeway right outside my back door. This is not right. This is not fair.
Just to clarify, this roadway is not what's proposed. This is showing that this roadway would not be permitted to be connected here because of proximity. So that roadway that's going down right behind your house, this is just the what if scenario that we were asked to come up with.
My next question is, you went through the wetlands to build the apartments.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, now you're conscious about disturbing the wetlands here after you decimated the one across the freeway? I'm not getting the value there, or the comparison.
When you impact wetlands, you have to show to the agencies the purpose and the reason for the impact. And a temporary parking lot, having a permanent project like an apartment complex or something, you can tie that to it. Then you have to do all your mitigation measures and such, to offset the impacts. But having just something in there as a temporary, that's a much more complicated process.
But in 5 years, you can come back and extend that to permanent.
Right.
So I don't believe that that's temporary thing is gonna work, because you've already got stuff there. See what I'm saying? You
I
got your
see
foot
what
in
you're.
the door.
I do see what you're saying, but the other element of that is that the permanent solution or the permanent phase is down the road. So the reason that was not selected as impacting the wetlands right now is, are we going to go impact the wetlands right now and then come in later? It's better to not impact the wetlands for this temporary road at this point. Instead, just wait until that permanent roadway connection, wherever DOT allows it to be, is nailed down.
So no matter what, you're still gonna impact the wetlands. You can't use that as an excuse not to do it now.
I mean, it's
I know.
it's a temporary versus a permanent solution. Yes, the plan is to still impact those wetlands with a permanent driveway, with a project associated with it that will help with the permitting process, doing all the mitigation, doing all of that, versus putting the temporary driveway in right now and then later coming back for the permanent driveway and DOT saying, nope, we need you to move it 100 feet, 150 feet, well, now you've impacted more wetlands because you put a temporary road in at this point.
Yeah, you guys don't have a soul. This is my house. I'm
Ma'am,
retired.
let's go ahead and wrap yours up. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right.
Really.
I have one other quick, it's quick, please. Karen Wolf, 130 Canal Parkway, and this may be most or best suited for council. We've heard they can't come off 98 because of DOT. So there's an option, they can either go further west and make it permanent, get their beach access, they're gonna have it anyway to handle the traffic and the hundreds of people, which really is the best solution. You go further west, make it permanent, get your beach access, do everything, save the cost of all this temporary stuff. The other part, if the council tomorrow were to approve them doing this, to allow them to impede upon Canal Parkway. We know they can't do this right here. So that means all of this and all the traffic are gonna be stampeding down Canal Parkway. There will be damage, there'll be road damage, there's gonna be driveway damage. You can't avoid it. There's probably gonna be dune damage, it's too much traffic. Lisa talked about that. So in whatever agreement is made, I would so hope that that agreement has language that holds St. Joe responsible for all cost, for all damage, because that should not be borne by the city of Mexico Beach.
Thank you.
Taxpayers.
All right, well, that will close the public discussion, and we'll turn it over to council. We'll start with you, Larry.
Thank you. Actually, the point I'm trying to make is really a summary of what so many people have made. Is we look at like John, I mean, we have a concept there, now we have a concept here, but that's not gonna really happen. But we also have St. Joe's Company's overarching long-range plan. So if they know they're going to do all of that, so they're doing this, so they want to do the incremental costs of the permitting and stuff at their convenience, at their, in the most cost-effective manner to them. And I get that. But you cannot shift, just listening to this conversation, you cannot shift the burden of their project to Mexico Beach just because that's what's most convenient and most cost effective for Port St. Joe. So if they know they're going to be filling in all this wetlands to build all this rest, and they're gonna be putting in a permanent lot, then they need to go ahead and do that now. Then they can build up around put their own infrastructure in, and then build up around that, rather than come up with a temporary stopgap measure that basically.
They did somewhat set a precedent for doing that in Windmark, when they told the public before we build all these homes in Windmark, we're gonna build parking lots that the public can only use these parking lots at one end of Windmark and at the other end of Windmark. And they're the parking lots that remain today. They were the planned permanent parking lots.
So it seems, to my way of thinking, it seems like what they've done is put the cart before the horse in this situation. Built, if you know what you're gonna do, get the permits in place, which also would go to how are you gonna get the people from the north side to the south side? How are you gonna get them from wherever they are down to the beach? You need permitted beach access. You can't say, well, we'll get to that, but meanwhile, we'll use, and these people's opinion, abuse what is already there until we get around to doing this. And it seems like that's more or less a summary of what everyone said.
If somebody could just help me again with this. Then the council asked them to do a temporary lot. We did not ask them to go ahead and build their permanent lot. That's what's been asked of them.
Well, I get it.
And so that's why they brought this to us. With that, I'm just making sure I understand that they're doing exactly what was asked of them.
Well, you're accurate. That was a mandate, but that does not mean that we have to accept their solution of what the temporary lot needs to be.
Your comments earlier started saying that they should just build their permanent lot, but we asked them to build a temporary lot before they build their permanent lot. That was asked.
That's true, but it was a different location. It was a different
All right.
location. It was further down across from the townhomes. This one's up further, so it's a different location.
I'm just trying to get back to that. We asked them to build a temporary lot.
The other way to look at this is a small grain versus a large grain. issue. I believe the city council gave a large grain mandate. Go build a lot on the south side of the road, full stop. The smaller grain, which is additional details that apparently, according to Rock, were in the minutes, but somehow didn't get passed through, is, oh, by the way, when you build this lot, address the entrance from this location or address the entrance from this location. So I believe the large grain was passed through, the small grain details were not, and that's what we're arguing about today. the small details.
And I'm not arguing about it, but I don't agree with you, because I think that Chris said that he brought these back to the city staff.
Is that true?
That's correct. And then formalized it with an actual, no, it was not a voting agenda item, but formalized it with a
presentation to the
presentation
council.
to the council. Correct.
But owners never got anything. They
I understand, I understand.
We didn't know.
It was the details.
Just to make a point, and I'm not defending or criticizing anything that's been said, but Chris, I'm gonna ask a question and I already kind of know the answer. You don't really have a clue how many years it's gonna be before your client develops the south side of 98. Is that true?
That's correct.
So this 5-year temporary parking lot, I mean, well, I'm not gonna give my opinion on that. This is a tough spot. It's a tough spot, you know, it doesn't affect you or me or anybody at this table, but it does, the people it does affect, it could affect for 20 years, let's just be honest.
Well,
Thank you.
That's all I'm gonna say about that.
So I'm not a voting member tonight because I'm an alternate, but Alara made it clear both in the workshop 2 hours ago as well as just recently. She said this is a quasi-judicial proceeding and any vote for or against the applicant's order needs to have actual ordinances backed up. I believe we've all seen this 3-page memo that was presented to us by the Canal Parkway residents, and there are 3 ordinances that in this memo's opinion are being violated. They're 3.00.03, 3.05.01, and 3.
And Laura's going to comment on those for us. And there is, in that opinion, but
There's other
I have not seen the memo. I have not had a chance to analyze it. I will let you know that the first citation, 3.00.03, is in regards to Article 3 of the Land Development Regulation, which has to do with subdivision regulations. This is not a subdivision regulation.
subdivision regulations.
regulations, yeah.
This is not a subdivision request. We're not subdividing land. The second one was 3.05.00, which is transportation system, it's a large section, so I'm not exactly sure which portion the reference was for. Does it mention it in the memo?
I believe they're just speaking of a residential street. The simple definition of a residential street is presented in the LDC. It's in Article 3, subdivision, whatever that means
So
or doesn't.
what is the argument then? Because there's not a street being constructed.
I'm not the person to ask.
Okay.
I-
I would have to be able to understand the argument to be able to provide you with comments, and I don't know that I understand the argument. What was the other citation?
Speak up from the audience if you can find it.
Well, I don't think we need to
They
debate
closed
it.
public.
So-
I say this goes to council.
3.
The council got all copy of all of this too, supposedly.
3.00.01.
3.00. Goes back to subdivision regulations.
It's a 05.01, 3.05.01.
And, yeah, did we not mention that already? 3.
That was transportation systems?
Yeah, those are
Was
the
there
streets.
So
3.00.3?
we're not constructing the streets, I'm sorry,
Dot 3?
30503? Is that what you're saying?
I would ask at least, Mr.
If you
Sloan.
could just give me a minute, please.
Mr. Moore, those regulations in there, does that pertain more to a subdivision being developed to
Yes.
follow that?
Subdivision regulations have to do with the
For,
subdivision.
for
law.
building that subdivision?
And we're talking about existing property that protects, existing property
Point
protected
of
by the
order.
You
LDR.
can't comment anymore, but please.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, that last one, 303 you said, or 305?
30501.
30501, we're back to the transportation systems,
Yep.
which has to do with
Yeah.
the streets. Construction, they're not constructing a street.
No, clarifications.
I've heard lots of comments, and I just want to offer sort of my summary on this. I've not seen any evidence yet that the lot is going to be full. No one from the public has said that, no one's observed that. That may change in the future when there's many more residents across the street, but so far, there was a lot there before the hurricane, the bathrooms used to be located there, so there was a parking lot there. I see it more of a convenience for the residents of Mexico Beach if the parking lot, if the parking spaces at the end of the street are full, or for visitors that come to Mexico Beach to fish. I don't see it as much convenience for the people that are moving into the apartments and even Salt Creek, because as we've attested, that's a long walk and downstairs and up some more stairs that's not a convenient path to the beach if you want to invest in a Salt Creek townhome. It could possibly help if there was an alternate that Derek's talking about this pathway and have both of them. But if you only come in that route and a person comes to the end of the street like they typically would down Canal Parkway and it's full, now they have to turn around and go back out onto the highway and back around and back in. That doesn't seem feasible. So if they did entertain the alternate path that is just sketched in here, it would seem like both of them would be more convenient than closing the original Canal Parkway. But I would hope that your developer would also look at, if this moves forward, and I understand that the city council has asked for this to move forward this way, that they would sort of simultaneous to this start looking at the longer term solution, which is getting all these new residents. And it's not a us them thing. We talk about like us or Mexico Beach, and these people are St. Joe. These people are Mexico Beach too. They're buying homes and they're renting apartments that they need to find a way to get over to the beach. And I would ask your client to start looking at how do you create a convenience for those people that are buying these homes, serving the military. How do they get their kids across the street to the beach?
I'll add my comments to this. That's what we originally did back in January 23. That was over a year ago. And that's a year and 9 months ago. And it would seem like if that lot went where it should have been, by now we would have got a wetlands permit because you're not filling in all the wetlands. Just like where your lot is right now, to move that road over a little bit, you're only talking about a little bit of wetlands, and they're gonna be filled in anyway. That could still be a temporary lot with that done. You know, when you look at the purpose and intent right here, black and white in the comp plan, comprehensive plan, which we have to follow, so it's promote the general welfare, prevent congestion and overcrowding, maintain public safety, retain property values. We ain't hitting any of that. This is going to destroy the property values on Canal Drive by putting that parking lot down there. And it
I think
maintain
you have to prove that that would happen. And
Well-
that would be your opinion that.
public safety, having 65 cars coming down that road to a parking lot and people walking down a street that's just wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other is a public safety issue. It would make more sense to delay it, get a permit to fill in a little bit of wetlands to put that road from 98 to that parking lot.
Yes.
But-
Yes.
So if I can just make a final comment, and here, my job is to make sure that anything that comes before you has been reviewed against the comprehensive plan and the land development. I don't have an opinion, other than the fact of whether it meets the requirements. And So you have asked me to do that, or the city has, and I have made that recommendation, and that is based on some of the engineering comments and the access easement, or whatever we're deciding to call that. There isn't anything I can find that would cause them to be inconsistent with those documents. So I don't have anything that I can give to you to say that they can't do what they've asked to do.
Lee, did you have something? I was gonna ask you just to say that what, you started out by saying there was a few things that you had not seen yet, or that, with that, even though you made the recommendation.
I haven't seen this memo that's been discussed.
From what we were asked to do from the last meeting.
There was some requests by the board here that they addressed some things that you wanted some more information on, and that was, one of those was the attorney's request of the access easement to define temporary, which is one of the reasons why I feel like we need a huge overhaul of your land development regulations, because some of these things would be head off if we had some of these measures in place, but we don't have a definition of temporary, so we've asked the applicant to define temporary for us. And then you ask them to look at the alternatives to ingress and egress, and you know, they have indicated that FDOT will not permit a driveway at this location. I can't confirm or deny that. I think your engineer probably could with Anchor. That's more of an engineering question, but otherwise,
Well,
you know.
and then what I recall is there was, at your request, you requested that we mention that there were some outstanding engineering questions. I think that's
Yes.
what Lee's referring to. It sounds like you're
So those
satisfied
are
that those have been.
those are in your report, and the engineer has asked them to modify the sidewalk to 6 feet, which they said they have. The engineer asked them to install 3 hardened concrete accessible spaces for ADA requirements, and looks like they've done that. And looking again at that access easement, and that's being drawn up at the time this report was written. So
Laura, based on what we had asked them to go back and do, they've done everything except we don't have that access, that access easement agreement. Is that the only thing that we don't have?
I haven't seen it. I don't know if Tim
I haven't finished it, and certainly in light of what they gave me today, it looks like we've got a little work to be done.
Well, for more discussion here at the table, would it make more sense to delay the parking lot with a timeline for them to get the wetlands filled?
I'm going to say what I said last time, right? That you mentioned, I think you mentioned previously about when one of y'all mentioned about when you were building your house, about how difficult that process was with somebody telling you to do something and then you do it and then find out you didn't have to do it, or you did it and you didn't have it, or whichever with that. This is now the second time that this applicant has come before us and asked to move forward. We gave them parameters. They met those parameters. They brought it back. Last month, we asked them again we said we would table it until we got more information based on certain things. And they brought back everything except the easement access license agreement, however that is. They've done what we've asked them to twice.
Well, it's
No, picture.
that's a difference of opinion. Because the first time we asked them to do something, this
Well,
came.
what he's saying is,
Yeah,
they did what we asked them to do last
It's not
month.
at the same, okay, I wasn't here last month.
Correct.
But the same, it's a different location. This is a different location than a year and 9 months ago when we said,
Last month.
put it here. I'm just saying, that's how this started.
Yeah,
The
and-
location was moved, and this is why we're here, where we are right now.
It's my understanding this is the location that was presented to the city council in January of this year.
In January what?
This year.
Just for,
Yeah, I'm talking January 23. January 23, the recommendation of the city council was to put it across from the townhomes where the gate is. That's,
Go ahead.
just for the record, I think we all remember January of this year, there was a whole lot of chaos going on in the government of our town here.
Yes.
So what was presented and how it was digested by the people that were serving at that time, I can't speak to. But what I can speak to is I've got a question for council. Would it be appropriate to include in a motion our definition of temporary, to not leave it open-ended for renewal every 5 years? I mean, is that appropriate?
Well, as I say, when I drafted my version, it was predicated upon the ultimate build out of the PUD and the requirement of when they would do that. So, yeah.
My point being, I don't really would prefer, I would prefer everyone to be happy and kumbaya and all that, but I just don't want to see this turn into, no disrespect to Chris's client, but I don't want it to be a 20-year thing and I'm walking with a cane if I'm still here and we've still got a temporary parking lot. I would like to mandate that the developer come to the city within 5 years with a permanent solution to where the permanent beach parking access is gonna go. I don't think that's too difficult to ask. I mean, they've got a huge area to develop and there's gonna have to be access to that beach. You would have thought, maybe it's too much, I'm an engineer by trade, you would have thought that somewhere down the line that we're gonna put people on the north side, but we're not really gonna give them access to the beach. They're gonna have to figure that out on their own.
Chris, how many homes are going in the park that the infrastructure's going in now?
That was my question.
Talking about Salt Creek Phase 2, I think it's about, I think it's 92. It's a combination of single family
92 plus the townhomes.
plus the
Yeah, I got
6
6 towns, I
houses.
didn't, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's really no plan for the south side yet, it's just a concept. So that's my question. I don't want us to leave this table with some open-ended thing that councils in the future just have the liberty to keep renewing another 5 years and another 5 years. I think that's irresponsible for us as
Yeah.
a,
So I think the
So
question was.
your suggestion would be instead of them proposing to limit what they're calling a license, which I'm gonna disagree with probably, but to 5 years, that instead you put an affirmative obligation on them to do something within 5 years.
a permanent
Yep.
solution.
permanent solution.
Yeah, they're kind of, in that presentation, they were leaving that door open. You know, it could be renewed, and if it is, then we'll build, you know, all,
Landscape.
you know, plants and landscape it. So that, that's kind of a big escape
Yeah, but, or that,
clause.
yeah, to pin a developer down to
So here.
that kind of timeline on the PUD.
Here's my experience, because I work for developers as well as local governments. Development orders expire, permits expire, state agency permits expire, and they're market driven, so they're not gonna build homes if there's no market there for somebody to occupy them. So if for some reason they get all their permits in order and they're ready to start, but there's no market there, they're not gonna start building those homes until the market is ready. So it's just a matter of supply and demand, and
Like
you don't wanna put something, if I had my developer hat on, I would be concerned about putting a timeline on myself, because if I can't get to the market in the timing that the market is ready for me to get to, but I have all these permits that I've spent a lot of money in engineering and permitting on, now they're expiring.
So let me ask the same question in a slightly different way. The city council has already levied a provision that this parking lot get built
That's right.
as a condition.
As a
of
requirement
some- yeah.
of the issuance
So
of the salt.
is there a way to do something similar with a timeline instead of a parking lot?
Well, and Chris, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be anti-development. What I'm saying is, at least have a permanent plan for that parking lot within 5 years. That seems to be reasonable.
So that's something you could have engineered within 5 years, certainly.
And even if you decide now, we're not gonna develop any of that residential area, you could at least give us a small DEP permit to fill in a small area to create a parking lot. That then, look, I'm not that kind of an engineer, but surely to goodness, you could come up with an idea that says, we'll put this beach access parking lot, just like you did at Windmark, and then we're gonna build around it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So just to at least have a permanent plan that the people that are still, you know, kicking down here can say, eventually, that's gonna be where the parking lot goes. And the access is gonna be a quarter mile up 98. That's all I'm saying, is if we could include that in any motion or recommendation, that was a question.
So that might be a high-level decision that
Yeah.
Chris can't answer.
You can
I'm
ask
guessing.
for that, but again,
I think
your
it's an
task,
obligation.
your task is to determine, have they complied, and this is a little unusual circumstance, but in a traditional sense, have they complied with the Mexico Beach Land Development Regulations comp plan? And if they have not, then you use, as Laura suggested, you use that as a basis for denial. If they have, or if you believe there are conditions to impose that would make it better, which may be what you're talking about, then you would send that up with your conditional recommendation with certain conditions, one of which I hope is that the city obtain an adequate access easement or license in a form acceptable to the mayor or the council, or however you want to do it. But at some point, that you all need to just make that decision.
Could that be done in the form of putting a condition on the easement?
Well, I mean, you can put a condition on the easement, like I say, right now, I just got this thing today, and it looks a lot like you would see imposed on a homeowners association.
Yeah, we're just talking conceptually here for some of the
Yeah.
structure. Is that happen, or you can just put, you know, like a condition on the easement?
Yeah, well, I think certainly it would be conditioned upon public access through an easement or a license, acceptable to the city.
So can you put a time frame in that condition?
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Again, perhaps the engineering for a permanent location could be done. I thought they had identified the actual location in the PUD, have they not, Laura?
I thought you did too.
Yeah, down,
It's down by the hotels.
yeah, down
By the
on the
hotel.
far south.
So I think they conceptually have already identified where it's gonna be, and I know Chris doesn't wanna commit to that's where it's gonna be, but within a little bit of movement, I would think that's close to where it's gonna be.
So I think we're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, apples and oranges. We're talking about a PUD, but now we're talking about a development order. So can a time condition be put in as a condition for the development order, not the PUD? Those are two
Well,
different
development
things.
orders by nature expire if they're not acted upon within a certain period of time.
Okay,
They can be renewed, but
sure.
I think, in the 6 months here, Laura?
I'm not sure that it even says, but that's something we need to look into. It's usually common for 6 to 12 months on a development order at a
Yep.
local government stage.
Most governments have an expiration date on there. But I think their impetus to build this thing is quicker, given the fact that the council's apparently conditioned the vertical upon the construction of this parking lot. So I don't think they're gonna be dilly-dallying around in a long-term basis, trying to figure out something on this temporary parking lot. They're gonna wanna build it.
The construction across the street doesn't indicate that. Moving quickly.
But they can't go vertical, from what I'm understanding, they can't go vertical on Salt Creek 2 until they get it constructed, and construction is still gonna be a month or 2 months, or however long it takes to put the gravel parking on there.
Did you get what you needed contingent upon adequate easement access acceptable to the city?
I understood his verbiage.
Okay.
And it don't pin me down yet until I can see what it was.
So Laura, look, you know, I read through all this 3.0, everything in the comp plan and all that. There's nothing in here that can stop using a road in a development, which is canal, and then adding a parking lot after the fact. I mean, the parking lots, the road and the houses have been there. And to go and say, okay, we're gonna put a parking lot in the middle of the Canal Parkway off to the side, and for another 65 cars to come down at. There's nothing in here to stop that from being done?
That's correct.
Didn't we have a parking lot behind the boat ramp and there was an existing road coming around behind it?
I'm not sure, I can't testify to that.
That was during the hurricane. That was an emergency FEMA thing that was done for the hurricane. I mean, so there's no way to stop Canal Parkway from being used.
It's a public road.
No, I mean, to me, sitting here, listening to that, okay, I can't stop it, there's nothing in here legally to stop it. At least do something, okay, build a parking lot where it is, use Canal Parkway, but 2-3 years from now, it's done, it's shut down, unless you have a permanent road from 98 going to that, fill in your wetlands, and put in a road to go to that.
I would be happy just to have a real plan.
In 5 years, so.
Well, I mean, that's
Find
because,
a real plan and I'll make a motion.
And council advice,
If you'll make,
Did you make a
find a real plan, I'll make a motion.
By a real plan, I mean, so the process is, they want to develop. And that's why I'm hesitant to try to turn the screws on them to say, just a plan showing where the permanent parking lot is and where the permanent access is gonna be. The permanent access to their permanent parking lot can't be Canal Parkway.
no, it's gotta be 98.
Can't be. So that's what I mean by, you know, I'm willing to give him 4 or 5 years
To come up with a
to
plan.
come up with that and show us where his access road is gonna go.
Sounds reasonable.
And then, you know, we can go wherever we need to. I understand that the crisis that was going on, when all that, we were all on the board here. And when it was presented and Councilman Wolf made the motion and it passed the council, then the chaos is really ensued. So it's not Chris's fault, it's not his client's fault, it's not, you know.
I mean, everybody's sitting here, you said you've been down there
I've
every
been
day,
there.
and this and that and that. Does that parking lot right now need to be there within the next couple of years? I mean, right now, could it be put off for 3 years?
Not according to the city
City
asked them to do
council
it.
has required them to put it in before the issuance of Salt Creek Phase 2. And they would like to start Salt Creek Phase 2, so they're here asking for the development order on the temporary parking lot.
Okay, so what, ask the attorney the question, like you said, with a timeline, to make a motion to approve this parking lot where it is right now, Canal, I hate to say this, but Canal being the access way, with a time limit of 3 years, for them to agree to have a permanent road connecting to that parking lot from 98.
Well,
A
what
3-year
happens-
time limit.
Is that legal?
That's not what you
If I-
said.
if I-
No, what I said was to have a
Permanent
permanent plan.
Yeah.
Well, a permanent plan could be 15 years from now.
Yeah, if I may say one thing, with all that mess that was going on at the city council, they thought they were being clever, and they were using this temporary parking lot as a hammer. And now what
So-
it was done with making that mandatory.
So here's my mindset, and I really like, Rock, your point of 2 to 3 years. The city has serious parking needs.
Well,
okay?
yeah,
That's a different issue. But we're all in this pickle because of what happened.
Yep.
I say you open that thing up for a maximum of 36 months, and then it has to be,
Club, shut
Shut
down.
down.
That's it, shut down. And-
because then that does two things. That gets him his development order.
Yep.
The residents know they may be slightly inconvenienced
But no longer then.
for no longer than. And then this licensing agreement can be real concrete. It's only this long, we're pulling the gravel out and we're done.
Yep. Chris,
So-
let me
so-
ask you a question quick. We had this conversation way back when, in 2 years.
I think it's-
All your phases 3, 4, and 5 over here, there was comments made that the infrastructure that Mexico Beach has, as of now, cannot accommodate that. Because I remember discussion saying that development on that side might be years down, years down.
A little off topic.
Well, no, it's not off topic. It's because we're saying with the timeline.
We're trying to come up with
10,
conditions.
15 years before, I realize the marketplace. I realize the market. But if the market changed and said, okay, we can build over here in 3 to 5 years, my understanding was that we don't have the infrastructure to do that right now. That was a conversation a couple of years ago. And you're shaking your head because we had this conversation.
Correct.
And that's why a timeline has to be put in here, and we discussed like 3 years maximum. And nobody's gonna convince me otherwise that St. Joe Company can't come off of the road in 3 years from 98 to that parking lot.
What happens at the end of 3 years?
We just closed the parking.
Close down the parking lot.
And they go on with what they were doing and.
Well,
Let them start going.
They need parking. Vertical. The city needs parking, but not there. We need a permanent solution. Now, they may not build their permanent solution, but I tell you what's gonna happen. The residents on the north side of 98 out there are gonna start screaming. Because we all live here, and we see what the summers are like on the dedicated beach down here.
Oh, yeah, that's packed already, so that's where they're gonna come.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's why this was all changed 2 years ago before the approval for phase 2.
Sounds like we're getting closer. Does anyone have a motion they would like to make?
I do, I'll do one, and we can go down wherever with this. I make a motion to approve the development order with, help me with, I don't know if it's with the recommendation, or with the recommendation of one, that your easement questions, however you said that.
Condition on an easement or license acceptable to the city, and this, that you're making that as a recommendation to the council.
Correct. Well, this whole thing's a recommendation to the council, but yes, and that was the first recommendation.
Part of the motion.
And part of the motion, and the second part was that this parking lot ceases to exist in 3 years.
And we also would ask, not putting words in your mouth, but we would ask that the developer present his permanent solution for access from 98 to his parking lot within that same 36 months. I think that's reasonable.
Will be built,
That
not
sounds clear.
recommendation, be built.
Laura, you got something?
Could I ask that your motion include the recommendations that the site plans be resubmitted as indicated by the applicant they would, with the sidewalk being modified to 6 feet? What was the other thing? The parking lot have 3 ADA hardened concrete accessible spaces, and the easement access is accepted by council, whatever the technical term is for that.
Remember all that?
That's a good thing, it's all recorded.
Yeah.
And as part of that, the time
Tammy's
frame of
writing.
the
I've
temporary
written
be
10
included.
pages here.
Good thing it's on video.
Yes.
Okay, so is that,
Yes, I'm amenable to
Repeat
that.
motion.
okay, so we have a motion,
I'll second that motion.
we have a motion, and we have a second. So Tammy, you want to call for a vote?
Okay. Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Elsie,
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Crease,
No, because there's nothing in there saying they have to have a road from 98 to that parking lot?
No, you got it, no.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
I believe that concludes everything on the agenda tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion to a second.
Tomorrow's meeting, the morning meeting?
9 a.m.